Thank you, Ali. So, welcome everyone again. As Ali mentioned, this is going to be a brief tech talk around the in-session generation of isometrics with an OpenPlant Modeler application. And in this session, we are going to do an overview of the functionality, how we are generating the isometrics now, what are the possible workflows, are there any additional workflows that we are able to support now. Also, we will look at the some of the updates around connectivity checker messaging that in turn also helps in understanding the overall isometric workflow and how it helps in increasing the overall efficiency of the complete process. We will also look at some of our future plans as to where we want to take this functionality, what are some immediate enhancements planned for isometric generation. Okay, so before we look at how we are doing the generation of isometrics now, let's have a quick look at what used to happen before this latest SS6 refresh release. So if we look at the existing workflows, are standalone users, meaning who are not using OpenPlant Model Server and are file-based, were designing in OpenPlant Modeler. Once the design was complete or model, they would run typically a connectivity checker, making sure that all the connection and joints are valid, and if when things look good, they would then generate isometric sheets using Isometric Manager. And once all the ISO sheets are there, they would then typically generate an I model, and this I model then will be opened up inside the OpenPlant Isometric Manager application by launching OPIM and opening up the I model. They were able to generate the isometrics, and then later post this isometric to project wise, and so if any change used to happen, if something was wrong in isometrics, typically in this cycle they'd go back to the design, do the changes there, and run the whole cycle of operations again. So from the looks of it, it looks like the feedback loop of the overall process was somewhat large, and if to do make changes, there were a lot of steps involved. And when we are creating ISO sheet from a pipeline, typically they could create with various methods by creating stop signs, placing manual selecting components manually and allocating into different ISO sheets, or using auto generation of ISO sheet when the ISO sheet manager. So when for any change that was happening in the model, moving around the stop signs and making sure the right component is part of the ISO sheet before the I model was published again, definitely used to take some time. Similarly, for our component-based connected users, you were typically launching up OpenPlant Isometric Manager, connecting to the any available your server project or repository, and what it used to do is to open up the OpenPlant Model Server tab on the left-hand side, where all the data can be seen, and from there, isometric sheets can be selected, and isometric drawing can be generated. Now, if the design changes, there wasn't any need to create an I model in this connected workflow, so the feedback loop was slightly smaller. But again, it did mean that refreshing the server and recreating the ISO sheet. So all these workflows are still valid, and what we're going to see is that what is the change in the OpenPlant Modeler Vieta Select Series 6 Refresh 2. So we haven't really taken away any workflow, so the iModel workflow is there, the model server connected workflow is also there, and but what is done is that in this refresh 2, OpenPlant Modeler users are able to generate in session isometric. So I think let me switch to OpenPlant Modeler window, and so I'm sharing a VM. Hopefully you're able to see my see my screen. So I've just, let me expand this project-wise explorer, and so I have this manage project set up here, and we can open up OpenPlant Modeler design model from project-wise explorer. Okay, so there might be a slight lag because of this virtual machine, but I'll try to speak accordingly. So this is just a sample model, and let me just add some references. We don't want to see the structural and grid model, so we can detach it for our purpose. So in this sample model, there are a bunch of pipes, pumps, some pieces of equipment, valves, and when I launch Pipeline Manager, it lists the available lines, and this is a typical workflow that used to happen earlier as well. So let me select one line, and let me go to IsoSheet Manager. So typically, in this case, I already have IsoSheets generated, but in the event that you had to generate isometric sheet, either you would place the stop signs, or you would pick components manually, or do an auto sheet generation. One thing in the event that you have to generate ISO sheet and in your model, good thing to do is always do a sort by connectivity, and this just basically does a network of components and highlights the open ends or the disconnects that we have in our network. So if I were to auto generate ISO sheets in this pipeline, I would get 3 ISO sheets, and this is what exactly I have right now. So it lists the component from one open end until it finds completes a network, and then if there's a break in the system, it starts creating another network. So we color code this, and this I find this tool a quick sorting method to be visually helpful for users, even when they're reviewing the isometric or doing some Q&A, to walk through and do a walk of the components, and that way they can quickly see the network being getting created. So let's just select one or more than one ISO sheet. So I've selected one ISO sheet, and the components are highlighted here. This button is added in the ISO sheet manager, and if I have not selected any ISO sheet, this is grayed out. But when I click here, and I can select just one ISO sheet, or I can select all the ISO sheets and hit the generate isometric button. So in your session, when you first time produce an isometric, it opens up Isometric Manager. For this implementation, the OpenPlant Isometric Manager has to be installed on the same machine, but it doesn't really launches its separate user interface. What it does is, by pressing this button, it produces the it opens up a window, a processor window at the bottom of your screen, and it produces the isometric here. So I can go, looks like the isometrics are processed, and do a show isometric. So this is a simple two component ISO sheet. I can look at another one. So once I've reviewed my isometric sheet, maybe I don't like this label here, so I can smooth the label where I want this to placed, and when this looks good. From the same session, I can post everything to project-wise if I have project-wise setup, or I can select individual sheets that I'm interested in, and I can post these to project-wise. So let me just go ahead and post these to project-wise. And if I go back to my project-wise Explorer, in my project folder, I have this isometric folder created, and so the DJs that I've been posting here are getting created here, and being posted at this location. So I've done some test runs on this model, so that's why there are more drawings here than just the three that we created. Okay. So coming back to my window here, I can close Iso Manager, and now I'm back to my pipeline manager window. Notice that the same button generate ISO is also available now on pipeline manager. So either you can generate isometrics by going into your ISO sheet manager for one or selected pipelines, or you could directly generate isometrics from within pipeline manager. So for instance, in this case, we can select these two pipelines, and the button gets active for generate isometric, and I'll just hit generate isometric. So once it's created the isometric drawings, the process is similar. You can post everything to project-wise, just like I did from the ISO sheet manager, or I can do that individually from here. Okay, so this looks good. Okay, so if I hit post all to project-wise, everything gets posted, and I have a setting that delete once posted to project-wise from this view, so the files are deleted from here. Okay, so similarly, this was in the file-based workflows. Let me switch to my. Let me close Pipeline Manager and open up another session of modeler. So I'm just creating a new drawing. So I've switched to a different session of OpenPlant Modeler. This is my main machine, and I'll maybe let me create just a new model here. And as the model gets loaded up, okay. So what I'll do is I'll attach another model as a reference in this session, and so the model we just used to generate some isometrics, I'll attach it as a reference here. And In my new session, I'll create a line. So just creating a random service and unit to create some components. Okay, and I'll start routing. Yeah, so let me see what the size of this pipe is. Sorry, I'm switching somehow. Let me just start a new drawing here. Okay, and give it a few seconds so that it opens up. Alright, so I'll just do the same steps again. I'll attach that model in this drawing here. And alright, so this looks good. Move it a bit. Okay. Quickly creating a dummy line. And I'll just draw. Bunch of pipe. Notice that I have connected two components that were attached as a reference. So if I launch Pipeline Manager now, and I see show all, I'm able to see both the reference files as well as the active lines. I can select active line, create auto-generate ISO sheet, and publish isometric drawing from here. Okay, so when I do that, the reference continuation information from the attached reference file is shown here. So the in session allows you to take advantage of all the reference attached workflows that were previously available. The other thing that you can do here is that you can even generate isometric drawings from the attached reference file. So I can select the attached reference files and generate isometrics of the attached references as well. And even by selecting the reference files, you get full continuity information from the connections in the active model. So this way, the in-session isometrics caters for all the attached reference files as well. You can only filter on the reference pipelines and generate isometrics from pipeline manager of reference files as well. So one thing that popped up in the other screen where I opened up an incorrect model was the connected visor. Let me So connected as visor is now available for all our VATI application with Select Series 6. You're able to utilize download it from Fulfillment Center. It works with all our VATI applications, and uh, it's a context-based help support which searches in all our learn content, communities, YouTube content, and the idea is to provide you up-to-date information which is relevant to you in the application that you're using. And if there is any help needed, you can quickly scroll through, filter, search from the available material, and if there is any help required on a particular function or a feature, we can quickly get access to that. The learn materials, if the learn courses are available, those can be identified and scheduled for your on-the-job learning as per your own schedule and convenience. We are continuing to update the content and material that will be available through Connected Visor. So it's a good tool to hook up to in our VATA applications. Okay, now just covering some of the workflows. The idea was that I'll quickly cover some of these workflows that we're able to support. And let me get back to my VM. So we close OPIM here and close this session. And now I'm launching OpenPlant Modeler outside Manage Workspaces, but I'll connect to Model Server now. So I can open up a sample model. So if you have managed workspaces set up or you log in through project-wise, you would be and you're connected to OpenPlant Model Server, you would be connected automatically. But I just wanted to show how it works outside managed workspaces. So I'm hooking up to the OpenPlant Model Server. So once it's connected, I see the server pane here. I can expand, go to the area of interest. I can do that by any configuration that I've set up. But let me reference out the unit 10. So this has a simple piping network connected to one piece of equipment. But if I now go and launch Pipeline Manager, again, just like I was able to do that with the file-based workflows where I attached the another model as a reference. If you're connected to model server, even if you reference out components, you're able to generate isometric equally the same. I can continue routing in this model, and the active pipelines will come here and show in the Pipeline Manager with the continuation information across the reference out components as well as the active components. So once the isometrics are generated in the similar fashion as they did for file-based workflows, I can go and visualize the references as well as my isometric. Okay. So that covers some basic workflows that are now supported and with what we call in-session generation of isometrics. Moving back to my slides and see what we have covered so far. Okay, so we went through all the standalone workflows. We looked at component-based workflows. Some of the additional possible workflows now that we can do in session are with support engineering. If you are doing design modeling in OpenPlant Modeler, you can attach the DGN as a reference now in OpenPlant support engineering, and in OpenPlant support engineering session, just place your engineered supports, and then attach that support drawing as a reference back into the modeler session and generate isometrics from within OpenPlant Modeler. With SS6 Refresh 2, we both support the iModel workflows as well as the DGen based workflows with OpenPlant support engineering. In fact, you can even open the same DGN if for some reason if you want to work in the same DGN in OpenPlant support engineering and place supports directly in the same DGN file. Okay. So moving on to connectivity checker messaging updates. And what do we mean by connectivity checker messaging updates? Let me quickly go back to switch back to my drawing. Just turn on. So selecting the file that I had created previously. Okay, so typically happens that if you have a simple model, you run connectivity checker, everything looks good, but at times it happens that when you go and run pipe, and if you go to Isometric Manager and you select everything to generate isometric drawing, you'd get a disconnect message that there are disconnect found. Now this was a very simple scenario that I had just have it on my screen, but typically it can happen in complex and busy model, and it's hard to find what that disconnect is. So in this situation, if you had run the connectivity checker in the older versions, you would get this message which says no disconnect found. And although it is highlighting that there is an open port very close together, which will be considered as a disconnect in terms of ISO generation, but it wasn't really clear from this window. And these are the cases which we have improved upon. And again, another example is this model. And let me just open up so this is a DG, and I've tried to create all the disconnects I could cook up in OpenPlant Modeler. In your typical day-to-day modeling, you will not encounter these scenarios, but if you have a lot of disconnects, the worst case scenario in the older versions, you'd get the error dialog, you'll do some fixed disconnect, and if you run again things would be reported in this fashion. So what we have done is that now when you run connectivity checker, if there are actual disconnects in the DGN, you do get a show error tab is selected out of the box, and by default you do get errors first, but there is a description here, and these descriptions tells you what type of a disconnect there could be. If you've done all the fixed disconnect, then if there are no disconnects, what we do is we default to show all, but we have added another section here which is called show warnings, and these are the things that would probably matter when we go to ISO sheet creation, but they will not they are not really considered as disconnect in terms of piping and joint definition. So with this color coding, and another thing is that by default everything is sorted now, so you don't get a one big list based on just the network, but they are sorted based on priority or severity of the issue. So the errors are sorted on the top, then you have all your warnings are sorted, which you can look at. And if so for instance this warning says physically close when no joint found, so I can actually zoom in and see that okay, the two components are very close to each other, and there's a probably a gap somewhere, and which is considered as a disconnect, and there's no valid joint there. So in this way, when you're running connectivity checker, things will be reported in a better fashion. So going back to our simple sample drawing. So in this drawing, there was a small gap here which may be overlooked, but if I now run connectivity checker in this drawing, I do get show warnings that hey, I have open end in the vicinity, and I can review it. Maybe it is out by design and I don't need to worry about it, and I have to create two ISO sheets in any case. But if it is some error or something is overlooked, it can be rectified before you generate ISO sheets or before you actually go into your actual isometric creation process. The other thing to note here is this the status bar. The messages are now the summary of the components is more prominent, and the open ends, warnings, disconnects, and total process components are listed correctly here. So there are no errors in this, but things are sorted by warnings, open ends, and correct joints. So we do hope that with these changes users will be able to create intelligent joints in a much efficient manner. Okay. Lastly, some future plans, in some of them will be done in VHI future releases, some will go into the Connect, but we do plan to have the ability in the in session ISO processor dialog to switch styles. Right now you can change styles through the configuration variable, but there's not a UI there, although you can do some customizations, but this will be provided out of the box in future VHI versions. Then ability to just generate isometrics by passing on the pipeline and let Isometric Manager do all the sheet creation. So things like that are also planned, and making the splitting options more consistent across OPIM and OpenPlant Modeler. We're also working on options to create a project ISO, spool ISO, and have a better status management tools and ability to manage design states in a much enhanced manner than what we can do right now. And of course, any input that we get from you with our in-session solution, we'd be glad to incorporate that in our future versions. We touched based on Connect Advisor, so I had a couple of slides here, but again, since the benefit is that since it runs directly in your design environment, it gives the user direct access to contextually relevant information exactly when they need it during any day of the activities. So with the Select Series 6, there is an updated version of Connected Advisor that we support. Lastly, when we talk about performance improvements, reutilization of the data, enhancing the overall project delivery, a lot of our users are now starting to utilize the reality modeling aspects and incorporating that into their overall project design processes. So we currently now have context capture, which is an easy to use tool to capture the existing asset and create a mesh drawing out of it, and attach that as a reference into OpenPlant Modeler. For walkthroughs, the Luminarity is supported by OpenPlant Modeler, and OpenPlant DGNs can be exported into Luminarity, and can be created some realistic walkthrough files. Point cloud was always supported in our previous VTI releases as well. There have been few enhancements along the way based on the latest versions, but this can be also used. Okay, so with that, I think I hope that this quick overview of the in-session isometric generations, just the walkthrough of a few workflows that we did, and overview of some of the changes in the connectivity checker would help you understand this new functionality, and would help you explore it as you adapt the new releases. So with that, I'll open the floor for questions. And